welcome everyone to the Event Show Live. Thank you for joining us again. If you'd joined us previously, or thank you for joining the show today. If it's your first time, the purpose of this show is to give a voice to the event industry, to hear from some of the influential leaders in our industry. And we've been very fortunate to have some great panelists join us over the last few weeks. And certainly today, really pleased to bring together this group to share their thoughts on the state of play in our industry and where we're at, and importantly looking ahead as well in terms of what we can see coming up next. So I'll jump into our panel very quickly. My name's Andrew O'Loughlin. I've been in this industry for 25 years and have had the fortune to work with many of you. I've been in the industry working across all sorts of events, ran an agency for 10 years, and these days I'm basically helping people create more successful events and navigate their way through the industry. So one of the initiatives, one of the forums we've been putting out there is a podcast called The Event Show, and then recently decided that it's a good time for us all to be coming together to share opportunities and challenges. So that's the reason for this forum, to bring us together, and hopefully it provides some value for you to take away some of the thinking and use in your work. So I'm conscious that we've all got similar challenges, but particular questions. So do encourage everyone to drop your questions into the Q&A box as we go. It's really good for us to understand what's going through your minds. Feel free to chat in the chat box. Please do put any questions or thoughts out there. I really encourage you to do so. So we might jump straight into it. I'd just like to introduce our panel, obviously. First up, just say hello to Shane Harmon, who's at Sky Stadium. Hi, Shane.
Hello, all.
Great vantage point Shane has today, and we'll talk a bit more about what's going on at Sky Stadium. Welcome also Aiden Blizzard. Aiden's with TLA Worldwide.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for having me, and yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to chat with some very esteemed colleagues here in the event show, and out there to everyone that's tuned in on a Friday morning.
Thank you, Aiden. And also joining us is Geordie Miles from Spark Event Group. Morning, Geordie.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. Good to chat to you again, and obviously Shane and Aiden, and those of you out there, whether you're a staff member, a casual, a freelancer, or you know, directors of companies and within the industry. So good to be on.
Excellent, fantastic. All right, we've got a fair bit to get through this morning, so I'm going to go to Shane first. Shane's the CEO at Sky Stadium, and has been in the industry for a number of years. I think a couple of Rugby World Cups, Shane, an Asian Football Cup, and obviously running one of the major venues over in New Zealand these days, and also acting as a director for the next Cricket World Cup, I believe. So look, really interested in hearing a bit about what you've been working on, and obviously your sort of take on the current situation. So we'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Sure, thanks. Well, I suppose to start with, it looks a heck of a lot better than it did, say, 8 weeks ago for the industry here in New Zealand. And even over the last couple of weeks in New Zealand, we've had no new COVID cases for the last 6 days. We've had 3 cases in the last 2 weeks, and there are only 8 remaining cases in New Zealand. We've moved down through the government's COVID alert system from level 4, which was full lockdown. We're currently in alert level 2. Mass gatherings have increased to 100 as of today, but all indicators are that we should be at level 1 by the end of June, if not sooner. And currently at level 1, there are no restrictions on mass gatherings. So certainly looking a lot more positive for us. You know, what we had been looking at 8 weeks ago, or at the start of COVID, and just working through our business, is we'd prepared a number of scenarios based on having no mass gatherings for 6, 12, and 18 months. To call it a business in some of those scenarios would be a bit of an oxymoron. So certainly looked pretty grim. But as where we sit now, Super Rugby starts in the middle of June. those first couple of games will likely be behind closed doors, but the second game we have in Wellington, all indicators are we could be back to normal, which is fantastic. So that's now, but obviously 8 weeks ago it didn't look so rosy. The priorities for us at the start were our staff. We were completely transparent with our staff. We didn't sugarcoat anything in terms of the challenges that lay ahead. Those 6, 12, 18-month scenarios, we shared them with staff. Obviously, we were all working remotely. A number of us are back in the office now. Some are back full-time, some alternating between home and the office. But we tried to apply as much structure as possible to our weeks, kept our standard all staff meeting in place on Wednesday morning, management and team meetings in place. We had staff drinks on a Friday evening and morning teas. We had a really supportive board, which was very important. We held off making any difficult decisions in the short to medium term because we didn't know what the immediate future looked like. We've got a small core team at the stadium, and our board's preference was for us to remain event ready. And they took the view that, we've got a very small but very capable team. And, their view was that there is an inherent cost in cutting staff, losing IP and rehiring. And that's a balancing act, of course, because clearly if we were looking at a 12 or 18-month scenario, you're looking at more difficult decisions. None of us have that crystal ball, but we're pleased to have been able to retain the team. And if we're back in action by the middle of July, that was ultimately the right decision. Budgeting and planning in those scenarios was obviously incredibly difficult. Our single focus over that period was cash flow. We've not even done a traditional budget planning for the next financial year at this stage. As I said, we looked at 6, 12 months, 18 months, and reduced scale for events possibly afterwards. But we're in a fortunate situation as a venue that we've paid down most of our debt. Although that said, the board isn't overly keen in going into debt to fund a problem with no light at the end of the tunnel. But again, that is changing for the positive. So the hardest part, I suppose, for anybody in the event game is planning when you don't know what you're planning for. And in the venue business, there are two main factors at play. One is mass gatherings, and two are open borders. And our business, Super Rugby, A-League, international cricket, international rugby, NRL, concerts, they all require open borders and mass gatherings. So with mass gatherings looking more likely in the short-term future, with the Trans-Tasman bubble hopefully coming on stream somewhere in the third quarter of this year, that's starting to pick up. I think long-term concerts are going to be difficult. We're not forecasting any pickup in the international artists coming into New Zealand or Australia in the current summer. We think a lot of those tours are going to be pushed back to the following summer. So it means I think the next 12 to 18 months are going to be pretty tough times still. But as I said earlier on, we're in a better position than we were a few weeks ago.
I appreciate your perspective on what you've been going through, Shane, and obviously some really important decisions were having to be made, and we'll get into sort of the future shortly. But when you do come back and open the gates, do you see the operations of the stadium being vastly different in the post-COVID world in terms of how the stadium will run and the protocols and things you need to put into place? And there's probably a fair bit of it depends on the situation there, but
yeah, I mean we're still waiting guidelines on what level 1 looks like, but the early indication are we did have a couple of events at level 2 before going into level 4, and the focus there was education, messaging for the public, making sure we had plenty of hand sanitizers around the venues, making sure that bathrooms and soap holders were always clean and full, PPE on catering staff in terms of gloves and masks. So they would be the main ones. Venues are pretty good in terms of contact tracing because you have ticketing databases and members. So I think contact tracing, for venues, isn't going to be that difficult. I hope that's as far as it goes, because physical distancing in major venues is difficult. You know, you could look at 30% capacity and spread people around the bowl, but then you've got issues with narrow concourses and queuing for food and beverage and bathrooms and queuing to get into the venue and then leaving the venue. So my suspicion, or I suspect that it'll be a relatively light touch, education, conscious of the issues and challenges, and just keeping people informed.
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting, and I guess there's a lot of speculation or discussion and thinking about what that might look like. So it's really good to get your views, given your role in terms of how that will look when we come back, or may look. Thanks, Shane. We'll certainly come back to you to get your perspective on what the future looks like. I'll bring Aiden into the chat. Blizz, you've got a role at TLA Worldwide, which had the pleasure of working with you across the summer, across the cricket season. But I know you work across sort of all manner of projects and have an interesting view of the event world. So I'd love to hear a bit about your current role and what you and your team are working on at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Yeah, absolutely. It's been an interesting time. My background has been in cricket for, I think I'm ticking over into my 17th or 18th year. So look, I'm the group account director. My role predominantly is to look after our cricket clients. But naturally, in the events world and consultancy world, we work across a number of different sports. So for us, for cricket in particular, it was you can almost count your blessings. We obviously had the T20 Women's World Cup, where we saw 80-odd thousand, just short of a world record, into some ODIs against New Zealand, which is essentially where COVID really started to put the brakes on the sporting world in Australia, and then we've gone into a bit of a hiatus. But for us, it's been an interesting time because obviously TLA Worldwide have got a talent arm, we've got a merchandise arm, we work through consultancy, and we've also got QMS Sport, who do a lot of LED signage in stadiums around Australia and New Zealand. So for us, it was a really interesting time where some staff were ramping down, others were ramping up, and the uncertainty of, do we have crowds, do we not have crowds, where's our income coming from, what do we do next, was really, like most people on this call, was really sudden. And one of the things that we've been really lucky as a business is we've now got private investors. So early on in the year, QMS Sport bought TLA Worldwide, which was then bought by Quadrant Group. So being able to work closely with them, we knew that this wasn't going to last forever. But I think one of the things that Shane rightfully called out earlier is, if we start to take stuff off, we don't know when we're going to be coming back. We lose IP, you lose camaraderie, and I think everyone on the call knows, in a strong events team, you have camaraderie and everyone knows their role, and we always play to people's strengths. One of the things I feel in sport in particular is very rarely does someone come in and know what their role is, and training staff is also very challenging from the get-go, particularly when you're in the thick of it. So while we are just starting to see the NRL back, the AFL will be back soon. We don't think, Victoria in particular, we don't think it'll be a rush to get fans back, but what we do know is that fans more than ever need connectivity, and this is where TLA is starting to pivot, and we're starting to understand a little bit more around what our strengths are and start to work with that. We're very lucky that we know our fans very intimately. So moving forward, it's around how do we partner with other companies or work with other tech companies that have got technology to be able to connect with our fans in the way that we know it. So cricket in particular, we've got a little bit of time up our sleeve. The fixtures were released, but we all know that things change really quickly in this environment. So whether or not there's a second wave, we're not sure, but we'll keep an eye on everything that's going around and all the leagues around the world, keep a close eye on it. But again, we won't veer out of our lane in terms of what we do really well. We'll look to get some help or assistance in. Particularly now more than ever, brand health for a lot of organisations is something that's on the forefront of their mind. So if you take a shortcut or try and get something out that's not quite ready, it can be quite detrimental to your sport. A lot of fringe fans, I'm not sure what they've been up to over this time, but if they don't have an opportunity to engage, that's an opportunity for another sport or another recreation for them to nab them. And we all know that it's quite tough to re-engage fans sometimes. So that's probably been our focus over the last couple of months. But I guess the priorities that we had from the get-go was, number one was our staff welfare, and number two is our client welfare. So we hung in there for as long as we could, and JobKeeper came at a very good time for us. I think without letting too much go, I feel that our senior management were very close to making some tough decisions, and we were able to keep majority of our workforce. And then the next parts have been around workflow and connectivity. So we have got technology, but to ramp that up was something that we needed to do really quickly and figure out what we needed to do. So back of house administration has been one, quite mundane, but just to keep people engaged. So we've gone through a lot of those bits and pieces, and then our partnerships team are working really hard with the AFL to make sure our pipeline has opportunities ahead. So we're working around the clock without briefs a lot of the time, just to go out and present opportunities to make sure that our clients who are working on skeleton staff, we'd say, have those opportunities in front of them ready to roll when they're ready for that. So that's probably been the main focus for us over the last couple of months. I don't know about anyone else on this call, but I love seeing people's faces. I love being around people, but yeah, Zooms are great and Teams are great things, but I'm really craving getting into some sort of environment. I'm happy to be 4 meters away from anyone, but can't wait to be around 3 or 4 people at the same time, just to get that human interaction again.
Yeah, brilliant. No, I certainly agree with you there, Blizz. And I think that's really interesting for our audience to hear what's been going on inside TLA and some of those conversations you're having with your clients. So I guess in terms of that, I think a lot of our audience are interested naturally about when things are picking up, and I know they're difficult sort of questions to ask, but in terms of the conversations you're having with some of your clients, is it, I think you just touched on, a matter of you being very proactive and going to clients to say this is what we could potentially do, or and are they waiting and holding for the moment?
Yeah, well, it depends on which sort of league or rights holder we're talking to, but I think the general consensus is we don't want to rush this. From a stadium point of view with Shane, if we rush this, the whole industry could go back into hibernation. So number one, for our talent guys, it's around looking after our talent to make sure that their welfare is in check. They're obviously either in an isolation blanket. They're obviously staying in hotels and no one's allowed near them. That means they're away from their family, or they're doing the right thing by going home and not doing anything else. So number one for us, it's around making sure that those guys are doing and guys and girls are doing the right thing. But number two is figuring out what's operationally are we able to do, but what's the cost or the deficit that we're going to have. If, I think Shane said before, if we've got 20,000 people in the stand, it's possibly going to cost us a lot more, and cost you the atmosphere and possibly integrity of the game if you've got a small crowd versus no crowd. We know that for cricket in particular, there's nothing worse than watching with empty stands. I feel like we can watch with empty stands at the moment and put some technology in to make it, to really underline the fact that, yes, we're not letting fans in, but I feel like if we've got only a few people in the stadium, it can be more detrimental to the game. So we're looking at all sorts of opportunities around outside of the stadiums. How do we take the game to people? Obviously, gatherings will increase, but if you can get up to 100 or 200 people, then can you look at different live sites and different areas that we can start to engage? So for us, it'll be around taking the game to fans, and we know what we can do once fans are allowed in. So that part will be quite, that'll be business as usual for us. But in the interim, it's around being creative to to take things to people. We know community clubs are going to be really crucial moving forward. We know that there's been a lot of cuts in those areas as well. So how to engage them to engage with our sport further and make it a little easier for them to number one, to try and make some money in the community. Because I feel like the gate takings are, if we're only getting 20,000 people through, they're not necessarily going to move the dial at all. So if we can get 100 or 200 people to a club or a community area and they're spending a little bit of money there, then that'll stimulate the rest of the industry as much as it needs, because we know that things are getting tight, and they'll only get tighter if we need to go into lockdown again.
Mm. Cool. Yeah, I certainly think there's some great opportunities, isn't there, to engage with fans and think a bit differently, and really fascinated and excited to see what comes about. And you're quite right to call out, I guess, that the sort of commercial models that we need to get into place to set ourselves up to succeed in the future. So yeah, look, we'll come back and get some more thoughts on that as well. Thanks, Blizz. And I'll bring Geordie in. Geordie, we had you on the podcast version of the event show shortly after the infamous Friday the 13th, and it was really good to get your perspective at that time, leading an agency, and part of your agency obviously works with a huge number of event casual staff and talent across our industry, and you work with a number of event operators as well. So I guess I'm really interested in, I know you had some 2 or 3 key things that you had set yourself up to focus on in the coming weeks and months, but coming back to you sort of a couple of months later, how's it all rolled out for you?
Yeah, we're really, really happy in terms of what we've got done the last couple of months. If you look at the action plan we put in place early, to look back at now and work out that we've spent our time wisely, is quite pleasing. I think from a staff point of view, I just want to note that it's fantastic to hear, obviously, Shane first and then Aiden. One of the first things they said in terms of their priorities was their staff, and I think that can be commonly a throwaway comment that everyone says, but to actually hear it backed up with some substance across the industry, not only from the 2 of you, but everyone has been fantastic, because to use the word you use, Shane, transparency's the biggest thing. At the end of the day, our staff are just as intelligent as we are. They're seeing the same news. They're going through the same situations. So that's something that we prioritise from the start. And in a lot of ways, there's no reason to sugarcoat or hide behind any of the truth. So we've been transparent from the start. And then obviously you mentioned, Andrew, that we've got a whole different level of staff in terms of all our casuals as well. So a number of thousand casuals. So definitely the engagement of them and keeping them up to date. We've got a fortnightly newsletter going out to all our casuals with a different theme every fortnight, which has been fantastic. So yeah, definitely the staff well-being, obviously direction as well, and support. We've got a fantastic team, and they all the tasks that we've put in, they've reacted to very, very well. So yeah, it's from a Spark point of view. I mean, we're a service provider, so we provide event management, we provide logistics, workforce, both at the senior level and at the casual entry level as well. So we've been reasonably fortunate in that we don't have we don't have a stadium which would need maintenance and equipment and storage and all that. We've just managed to hibernate really well, and in a lot of ways we're the perfect size. We're big enough to get through and weather the storm, but small enough that we can really shrink back. So yeah, we've been spending time wisely, just the classical working on the business, as everyone says, looking at new ideas for revenue. And that's not necessarily brand new ideas, but that's, parts of the business, and this might resonate with you, Aiden, parts of the business that exist, but during this period have become more prominent or will become more prominent moving forward. Refreshed ideas and processes and strategies as well. So Spark Event Group is only really 6 months old with the merger of Miles Per Hour Event Management and Event Workforce Group. So we're going to be spending a lot of this time really finalising the merger anyway, bringing 2 companies into one. So yeah, we don't own any events. So a lot of scenario planning with our clients, be it event management clients or workforce clients, and every single event have their own challenges, unique elements that we have to work through as we come back.
Mm. And are clients talking about operational matters yet, or is it still we're working out what we're going to do in the various scenarios? Have you seen the turn, I guess, towards the future events as yet?
Yeah, we have a lot of events that we are involved with around summer, so November, December, January, February. So a lot of them have been forging ahead as if they're going to keep going ahead. So then naturally the operational discussions have been coming in terms of, reduced crowd, etc. But obviously, similar to events and stadiums with reduced numbers, you've just got to look at the viability, because if I think there's going to be a bit of a squeeze for the small sort of medium event promoters, especially at venues that are, built from scratch, that require a lot of infrastructure, where you can't just simply say, well, we'll only have 50% of the crowd, because it just becomes not viable. So, unless they're government backed, there's going to be a lot of promoters, smaller and medium promoters out there, that are probably going to be overly cautious and may even wait, the 12, 18 months to actually run their events. And that's not just, potential reduced ticket revenue, but, there's a squeeze as well from the corporate dollar and the sponsorship dollar. In some cases, ticketing agencies reducing the percentage of money they're releasing to promoters pre-event to protect themselves, which is completely understandable given what we've gone through. So, you're probably going to see, and we're already seeing, a lot of smaller, low-risk events that will start coming back and being more prominent until people are more comfortable. So, there's kind of a dual thought. There's the clashing thought between people that, just like Aiden, eager to get out and be around people and be with people, but also the people that are still cautious and potentially a little bit cash deprived as well. So it's it's going to be interesting to see what sort of rises to prominence first, and that might come down to demographics in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I might come back to you, Shane. I know that you're a very progressive thinker in terms of what's going on in our industry, and obviously in New Zealand, but Australia, and then more broadly. I know you sort of put the question out there, or the theme of never waste a crisis online recently. Yeah. And I think that's a good mindset, and certainly the leaders I've seen who are making decisions and getting on with things are looking for the opportunity. But what's been your take on what the opportunities are in this period?
Well, I think over the next period, I said it earlier on, we are in for 18 months of disruption, and particularly those venues that rely on large music acts. Those acts probably aren't coming back until the summer of 2021, and that largely depends on vaccines as well. So there's no guarantees there either. I've been discussing some ideas with promoters. If Australia and New Zealand is a safe haven, get those artists down next summer, get them into 2 weeks in quarantine, get them to do 10-day tours of Australia and New Zealand. I think governments are starting to look at some relaxing of restrictions. Already we're seeing people who work in the movie industry are getting into the country here in New Zealand. I see the Australian government has made some exceptions for some of the Suncorp netball players based overseas to come back. We have the America's Cup taking place in New Zealand next year. Those crews do need to get into New Zealand in the foreseeable future. So I believe there will be some relaxing of restrictions for those type of events that are going to generate significant economic return. But the question mark is going to be, how comfortable are people coming back to events and mass gatherings, and what the disposable dollar is going to be. But I do have a high degree of optimism that there will be a surge in events on the other side. And my focus over the particularly last couple of weeks, as we start to see it look a little bit brighter, is looking at 3 years ahead. So I'm having long-term discussions with promoters. I think you're going to see venues, and this is something we've been looking at, is taking more control over creating their own content and partnering with promoters. I think the model where, you know, a venue puts these are our higher fees, this is how much it costs, take it or leave it. I think those days are gone. I think venues, to be competitive, have to be much more partner focused and potentially even look at some skin in the game. We've run a number of events in the recent past where we've joint ventured or underwritten events. We see ourselves becoming much more entering the promoter space ourselves, or at least joint venturing in that space. The other trend I think we'll see is a renewed focus on fans. You know, sports in particular have got very used to the big check of the broadcast and sponsorship, and generating revenue directly from fans is a lot harder. But when you think about it, nearly all revenue in sports is either derived directly from fans, being tickets, merchandise, etc., or indirectly via TV subscriptions, or from a sponsor, a brand hoping to target those particular fans. So I think there will be a renewed focus on fans, and it'll be those organizations that have the strongest, healthiest, most vibrant fan bases, I think, that will emerge strongest from this.
Mm.
Can I just jump in there, Andrew? Shane, that's fantastic to hear in terms of the venues. You know, I mentioned literally 3 minutes ago about promoters feeling that squeeze, and you know the potential of lost events due to promoters being overly cautious. So yeah, just a comment to say that's fantastic to hear that, you know, some stadiums are thinking outside the box and really working with promoters, and in some cases financially working with promoters, which makes sense from your point of view as well, in terms of, you know, welcoming events back to your stadium, whereas otherwise, you know, you could potentially have less revenue and less events. So really
Yeah,
good.
and I think also from an industry perspective, the various bodies and associations within the industry, we've made a submission to government recently for a significant contestable fund to attract events into New Zealand and to support the promoters. I think people tend to forget, you know, it's the promoter that's taking the risk on a lot of these big events, and you know, these artists significant minimum guarantees, and whether that changes in the new world, I don't know, because it's a very competitive industry, and you know, the promoters are so important to our industry, and you know, we recognize that as a venue.
Mm. I think it's interesting hearing you talk about longer term thinking as well, Shane. I think we've naturally got quite caught up in the moment, and I think our initial reaction to the situation was, you know, how do we change and how do we react immediately, which was needed and obvious. But also, I think looking at those next horizons, 1, 2, 3 years down the track, I think that's still important, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, my focus at the moment is getting Wellington really ahead of the curve when the upswing comes. And it's been interesting, you know, we pushed a lot of events from the start of the year into the end of the year, and it's now looking increasingly likely that those events are going to go ahead. We had one of our bigger exhibitions is Beervana, which is the biggest craft beer festival in New Zealand. That attracts about 14,000 people over 2 days. So they announced their show in November yesterday, and we're feeling increasingly confident that those events are going to go ahead. And so much so that with rugby pushed back towards the end of the year, with potentially test match rugby happening closer to the end of the year, with A-League coming on back with a Trans-Tasman bubble, with possibly quite a lot of cricket content between Australia and New Zealand, given border situations, we could actually see a bit of a squeeze in terms of availability towards the end of the year, which is a nice thing to have. All of that said, from a venue, it's those big events, it's the full houses that generate the big revenue, and I think that's where we're going to still struggle for the next 18 months. But there will be some opportunities, I think, for some domestic content in the concert space in Australia and New Zealand, and possibly across both countries. Was really impressed with what TEG did at ANZ Stadium with the Bushfire concert, which was, you know, predominantly Australian artists. So I think there will be some opportunities for content in that space over the summer, hopefully.
Mm. And really interested, while you've got me on the show, to talk a bit about the role of technology and analytics. And I know you're very strong in that area, and when it was business as usual. But what sort of role do you see technology and data and analytics play in that fan experience as you start to rebuild and map out those fan experiences again.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Aiden touched on that early on. It's certainly an important area for us. Sky became our naming rights partner at the beginning of the year, and a broadcaster and a venue working together might be an unusual fit when some people think, when a fan makes a choice, it's a binary choice between sitting at home watching on TV or coming to the venue. But the premise of the relationship was, how does a broadcaster and a venue work together to improve the experience both for TV and from a fan perspective? And data and analytics is going to be a critical part there. I mean, I look at Sky. They've got 40,000 households in Wellington who could potentially be stadium members. We've got 500,000 people coming into our venue every year. We've got high density Wi-Fi through the building. We have capability, and we're only really scratching the surface yet in terms of the analytics on that we can provide and work with Sky in terms of driving subscriptions. So there are going to be some real opportunities that we were looking at anywhere, and I don't think necessarily COVID was, has changed that. But it's a really interesting partnership for us, for two entities that you could look at are in some ways competitors, but we're looking forward to really breaking that open once we get back on stream post COVID.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting example of partnering well and changing the way that we work and operate and opening up new opportunities. So really interested to see how it all plays out at Sky Stadium. And Aiden, I think Shane's comments about the role of fans and the importance of fans would be sort of music to your ears, or you'd agree with that?
Absolutely.
That sentiment. I know we both experienced the sort of surreal nature of being in an event where there were no fans, and I guess that whole premise of it demonstrating when you take something away how valuable it is. And but your comments in terms of the role of fans and
yeah, absolutely. I think, and Shane hit the nail on the head there with the analytics. While we do know our fans, I feel like in Australia in particular, we're not necessarily leading the world in terms of applications or even stadium technology that is really understanding fan movements. I know that there's some stadiums now have bits and pieces around queue management and other things where fans can log on to the app to find out how far away a kiosk or a food vendor is and what the average wait time. But yeah, I feel like that's the space that there is a significant opportunity. I feel like AR and VR it's obviously their time to shine with opportunities with no fans, and when we do take cricket or sport to the fans, then I think the bells and whistles is a great opportunity for them to embed themselves if they are going to. One of the challenges we've had with a lot of virtual reality, which a lot of people we get pitched at all the time, is that it's not necessarily scalable when people are at a stadium. So what we do find is if you need to wait for something, the chances are you're not going to wait. So how do we scale a lot of these technologies up? So we're touching 10 to 15 to 30 people at once for the experience to be able to be a little bit more efficient versus people waiting around and moving on while they don't get a chance. So I think AR and VR at the moment is their opportunity to come in while budgets are tighter. If we can take them to the masses, I feel like it's a great opportunity. But the other part of that is the analytics, and I feel that there's an opportunity here for some apps in particular where we like to focus on barriers to entry, and Zoom's now a barrier to entry for a lot of people that are just over it, to be brutally honest. But downloading another app is a really significant challenge. In cricket, we've seen at-match apps that we've got stadium apps, we've got BBL franchises that have got apps. I know a lot of football clubs have got apps. There's an opportunity here to collaborate with stadiums, with broadcasters in particular as well, to bring all three parties or four parties. How do we get that technology there where the data that we collect is useful for parties, that we can improve our experiences, and most importantly, moving forward, I think efficiency is going to be one of the big ones. So particularly with stadiums now having challenges around how many people or queue management and bits and pieces like that, are we going to point where you've got a designated time to arrive at a stadium to mitigate queue management? I hope not, but reality is it's going to be a different world that 18 months where we really do need to rely on or come up with the solution with technology where we can collect data, where we can see people's movements and we can improve people's experiences, because it's only going to take one event at a major stadium where the operations aren't 100% on due. We have a little outbreak because of one little mistake. That could come down to many different factors. Shane's very lucky that he's been able to keep a lot of his staff, but some of the other stadiums have laid off staff, and when you lose IP, the challenges are quite significant, particularly when we're talking about people's health. So I feel that there's a space there to get creative or to collaborate, which I feel should be the buzzword moving forward, is bolting on technology or expertise to create efficiencies, to create less barriers to entry, and to make sure that we're understanding more and more about the fan each day that people are looking at.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Have you got anything further to add to that, Shane, around, I suppose, future innovations or things that we should be mindful of in that fan experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think Aiden kind of covered most points. I've seen mixed performance of stadium apps around the world. There was a big push early on in the piece for in-seat ordering, which never really took off in the US, and has become more of a kind of a club or a lounge type application within venues. We're looking with Sky. One of the things we're looking at is the whole area of VAR and TMO, and the ability to be able to give fans the opportunity to have that in their pocket, so that when something happens on a field, they can actually scrub back to the last 30 seconds, 1 minute of content, and make their own decision on what happened, which we think would be a pretty cool feature. And we're only able to really do that with having a broadcaster like Sky on board. While I'm a massive proponent of technology, and I'm also a big believer that it is just an enabler, and at the end of the day, the live space is the live space, and it should be a place for fans to come and socialize and interact and scream and shout and really enjoy the game. And I'm also very mindful of that any technology we implement is not taking away from that live experience. So it needs to be a balancing act.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's really interesting. I certainly think it's a design challenge for us in providing fan experiences to make sure that people who are attending the live events aren't missing out on anything that they would get from a broadcast or being at home. And I think it's a nice way to look at it, of making sure.
Yeah, I think one of the other things is, and there's been so much focus on technology, and technology sometimes becomes a euphemism for fan engagement, and we do tend to sometimes put the softer side of fan engagement aside. And one of the trends I'm seeing in the US, and it was a conference I was at a year ago, where the Chicago Bulls have actually hired a behavioral analyst to look at how fans actually behave. So they've made changes, for example, to their merchandise store, when he looked at this concept of the paradox of choice, and did some work to find out that they actually had way too many choices of hats for fans to purchase. So as a result, they cut their product line and are selling more volume and more hats as a result. So I think consumer behavior is a really interesting area that we don't focus enough on. I think fans and governance is a whole other area that needs to be explored. And I know the AFL leads the world in terms of membership, and I think a lot of US clubs have jumped on this membership bandwagon, but without really understanding what membership is, because in the AFL world, and you look at the relatively low number of fans that have requested refunds on memberships, that a true membership is a donation to the cause. It's not a financial transaction. It's your contribution. And whereas a season ticket is more of a financial transaction, where you're weighing up the number of games I'm going to go to. Will I get more value out of just buying the games individually they want to go to, or am I going to go to enough games that a season ticket justifies? Where a true membership, there can be governance aspects to it in terms of member elected boards. Football in the UK is in crisis at the moment. There's been some correspondence in the last 24 hours from government to the FA and the Football League in terms of some expectations from government and in the FFA rescuing some of those lower clubs, but having supporters trusts involved in the management and running of those clubs. And one of the most successful leagues in the world is the Bundesliga, which is a 50+1 rule, which means that the majority of the club must be fan controlled. So I think there's going to be opportunities out of this in not just fan engagement, but actually getting fans closer involvement in the running of sports. And I think that would be a positive.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate your points of that, using technology where it's appropriate and evidence. But I think that intuition into the human mind and the way that we behave and make decisions, I think some great examples of how we can be looking at our fans and understanding them even more and making decisions and providing experiences accordingly. So bit of the art and a bit of the science, I think, is needed in the future. And similar to your point, Shane, about, I think, when we have taken fans away, we've realized how critical they are in the whole ecosystem, if you like, in terms of the commercial elements, content, etc., and creating that experience. Just an extension of that, I think, is once we've taken events away, I think it's demonstrated how important events are. Without events, it's very difficult to engage with fans. It's very difficult to broadcast something and create content, isn't it? So I think perhaps the way we look at our events in the future will be different as well. I think we've always understood events are what it's all about. They're the platform, but perhaps there's a tweak in the way we look at our event experiences as well in the future.
I think so from broadcasters as well. It just shows how important fans in the venue is to the actual broadcast product as well, because we've watched a lot of closed door sports over the last period and it ain't the same.
Absolutely. Geordie, interested in your thoughts. You obviously get the opportunity to work across a range of events, and I think that's sometimes the beauty of being a service provider in the industry. But in terms of future innovations or even what will be the same and what will be different, what's your sort of take on that?
Yeah, Shane and Aiden have obviously talked about the engagement piece. And digital and physical working in together, obviously after this is all over. But probably to switch to something slightly different is something that we're working a bit on, and that's the organisational part. So event management companies, stadiums, businesses, whoever they are, because unfortunately, as much as we all want to prioritise our staff first, there's going to be some casualties out the back end of this, and there already have been. So we're going to see organisations and businesses that are scaling back up. They've got a reduced workforce. They've still got the same priorities in a lot of cases, higher priorities, more at stake, more spotlight. So definitely our industry has really been underpinned the last 10, 15 years in our freelancers and our contractors, where 10, 15 years ago, the contractors and freelancers were mainly people that were trying to find full-time work but couldn't. But now it's transformed to an actual choice, and we all know them and we rely on them a lot, and they really are the backbone of our industry. So I really see a lot of them being used and utilised a lot more when companies and businesses need to take less risks with their headcount and their workforce. They're probably willing to pay slightly higher for a shorter amount of time and save in the long run, and wait to see how things scale and see how things progress. So I think that's one thing that'll probably change, and that's something that we've seen a lot of, and we obviously use ourselves, but also as part of our workforce and our staffing model, provide to other companies as well. So we're already having a lot of those discussions, which is very pleasing to the freelance and contractor world out there, who have been hit harder than most of us. A lot of them obviously don't get JobKeeper, and some of them aren't even eligible for Job Seeker. They're sort of caught in the middle. So there's been a bit of publicity about that. So any support that we can do around that will be fantastic. I think as well in the events industry, we'll see, we're always quite proud that we look after ourselves and we look after our own, and we're very close knit. And I think you'll probably see that enhanced further to really looking at suppliers, partners, whoever it is within our industry first, rather than going outside the industry. So a couple of really small examples that pop to my head are, you know, as a business with our office, we're looking at, you know, new signage, you know, maybe some electrical works, etc. So rather than go to a signage company or a Sparky company, you know, are there options within our industry that can help us out first? I think the more we do that, the better it's going to be for our industry as a whole, because as I said, we're very proud of supporting each other. And I think throughout this, with the conversations I've had with a lot of people, that's probably enhanced. So there are probably a couple of things that pop to mind.
Yeah, I think it's a good call out, Geordie, and I would hope that this phase has been a catalyst to the industry connecting more together. And obviously we've always worked together, but I think there's probably other opportunities to work together more and see other organisations, suppliers, service providers in a different light than perhaps we haven't in the past. So I think it's a good call out. And I wanted to ask you, similar to that theme, I suppose, in terms of the support that's being provided to the casual workforce, I guess, and you're quite in tune with the network and the community that we have out there. What's your thinking in terms of the support systems that are in place? How are people feeling? Do they feel like they need more from other organisations and from government, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, internal support from the industry's been as supportive as was possible. From the government point of view, Aiden mentioned it, JobKeeper was an absolute godsend for a lot of us. So in a lot of ways kept a lot of companies afloat, and that was the core purpose for JobKeeper, which was fantastic. But the timeline on that is obviously uncertain, and the difficulty we've got and the uncertainty we've got is when government allows events to take place and mass gatherings can happen again, is going to be a little bit different to when they actually will happen again, and where people are comfortable to run them again and get out in the larger crowds. So that period of, you know, okay, we're stopping JobKeeper because, you know, we're back to normal. Well, we're not actually back to normal. So I'd be very surprised if for the hardest hit industries, so ourselves, the arts, definitely tourism, travel, there will be some ongoing support for specific industries like ours. And yeah, we'll wait and see. Hopefully the miscalculation of how much JobKeeper was going to cost initially will work in our favour in terms of some of that money, even though I know that money doesn't exist. It just means we, you know, it's borrowed money, but hopefully that goes and gets redirected to the industries that need it, like ourselves.
I know there's been some really good advocacy work done in the industry in parts, and certainly in New Zealand. I know that the event community, the New Zealand Event Association, has done a great job over there of lobbying government and representing the industry. So hopefully we see more of that, and that's actually a topic for a future show. But we are coming sort of towards the end of our hour. So Geordie, do you have final thoughts to share in terms of priorities for you and your team, or thoughts for our audience that they should take away and run with?
Yeah, probably just a couple of ones. Firstly, just to reiterate what I said before to the people out there within the industry, to really keep supporting each other and turn to the companies within our industry first is probably the first thing. Keep even just, you know, discussions, outside the box discussions with other people, other organisations, whether it's ideas, whether it's strategies. I'd really loved the last hour of hearing Shane and talking about the relationships, obviously firstly with promoters, but also with broadcast, with fans as well. You know, those kind of ideas now and strategies we've just never had time to really pursue. You know, everyone's always had ideas, but actually sitting down and going through it and working through it with other people. And, you know, just the discussions I've had with obviously we're in a situation with, for me being a business owner, discussions with other business owners, because we've got, different priorities and challenges to others. That collaboration has been fantastic and should continue. From a staff point of view, because I know there's probably a few people out there that are casuals or freelancers or even staff laid off, definitely use your time wisely. So there are good, useful, structured ways to fill your day and make them worthwhile. And we've actually, I mentioned earlier, our engagement piece to our casuals by fortnightly newsletter. We've had a theme around that. One of them was useful ways to structure your day with networking and engagement and updating CVs and a bit of personal development. Health and wellbeing was another one we had, and the one we've just released as well was just some links to personal development and educational ways to keep people busy and really upskill during this period. So yeah, if anyone out there wanted to jump on those newsletters, just feel free to reach out to Spark Event Group, and we can chuck you on the distribution list. So yeah, obviously, a couple of ideas there for whether it's companies or industry organisations and staff. So yeah, and keep positive.
Yeah, brilliant. I know you're very proactive, you and your team, in terms of leading the way or helping the industry out. So really encourage people to support the things that you're doing, Geordie. So thank you. Bliz, I might go to you next. In terms of your thoughts, and really appreciated your sort of take on things and some future thinking that you've shared today. What's your sort of final messages for us to take away?
Yeah, mine's just around people, and Geordie touched on it as well. We're all human, and we are all struggling, whether you are out of work, you're in work, you're in limbo. The challenges are very similar to everyone. So for me, it's just hang in there. For our team that I work with at TLA, people are our first priority, and we'll focus really hard on our fans, which is essentially, as we talked about with Shane earlier, around the insights and a strong focus on what people want or what they need at the moment, particularly over the next 8 months while the new normal is around. And the other one is, I guess, based on the hang in there, but a lot of businesses are pivoting and collaborating really well. So we now know that no matter what happens, we are able to change our ways. And we're going to need to be extremely flexible moving forward, because while we are, most people in this industry, quite optimistic, the reality is we don't know what's around the corner. So whether it's another wave or whether it's another train next year, whether we're able to keep up with the rest of the world when we do open our borders, I just feel that the opportunity here is we've all gone through a lot of different things over the last 2 to 3 months, that if you do reflect the resilience that people are showing and learning, and the journey, whether you're at the top level of an organisation or you're jobless, the opportunities to learn and to come out stronger for this are actually quite significant. So while it is tough most days to stay positive or engaged in particular, know that if this does come up again, you've been through it. And I think that's one of the rare things, that not many people have been through this experience before. Some people have been through the global financial crisis, which is close-ish, but we've all experienced the pandemic now. So whatever comes next, we are equipped to take it on and to learn from this. So yeah, just for people, hang in there. We're all doing it tough in different ways. We've all got different lives, but there are people out there in the industry that are very open to having a chat and to supporting. So Geordie, keep supporting the events network and the wider network, but just for people to understand that they're not alone, and just to reach out, because there are some really good people out there that'll help along on that journey, and we will stick together when we do get out of this, no matter how many speed humps there are on the way. Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. I think it's brilliant advice. Thank you, Bliz. And I'll just come to you for your thoughts in a moment, Shane. I just noticed KA has put a question in the Q&A box about the newsletters Geordie spoke about, and we'll perhaps share a link in the email that goes out, I think, from Zoom on these post this call, but and maybe share it in the LinkedIn post as well. So keep an eye out for that one, but definitely make sure it's easy for people to access those. Yes, so Shane, your sort of final thoughts for us to take away.
Yeah, look, a very, very similar vein to Aiden and Geordie. Really, this industry it's a freaking small industry, not just in Australia and New Zealand, but globally. It's highly networked, and the people that treat each other well during this process are going to come out of this well on the other side. So, we took a view that, with so many stakeholders, when you run a venue, be they members or corporate boxes, sponsors, suppliers, hires, council partners, etc. We of course made our board aware of what the actual contractual position was in this situation with all of those groups. But then we took a decision to put the contracts aside and what is the right thing to do here. And we've very much taken a partnership approach to all of our relationships. We've taken the view that we all need each other on the other side and that there is going to be shared pain here regardless. And this approach has worked well for us. We've put some agreements on hold. We've extended other agreements. We've done some renegotiation. We're ongoing dialogue with our council partners on what those scenarios look like. So really it's about doing the right thing. This is not a time to be screwing suppliers and really, trying to put the crunch on relationships, because as I said, we do need each other on the other side. At a personal level, and Aiden touched on it, reach out, keep talking. When I feel down, or I've had bad days over these 8 weeks, when you don't see that light at the end of the tunnel, everywhere you turn in the industry, everybody's in the exact same situation. So picking up the phone, talking to colleagues, talking to friends within the industry has been fantastic. And if you're at the start of your career, reach out to leaders. You'll be surprised how communicative senior leaders are within the industry. Be active on social media within the industry, on Twitter or on LinkedIn. Post, comment, message, and reach out if you want to chat or any advice at any stage.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's really, really good to have top of mind. Walking away from today's call, thanks, Shane. I think doing the right thing is obviously important, as you say, and keep talking. I think that's really good advice, and I think it's really a nice way to end the show. I think we should thank our panelists for sharing their thoughts and doing the right thing and keeping the conversation going in our industry. So really want to thank each of you for joining us today and giving up your time to share your thoughts. And also, of course, thank you all for joining us live this morning, and those that watch the replays. Really appreciate the support for the show, and we really do hope it's providing some value to you all, just to help navigate your way through this current phase and look at those opportunities which are coming about. So we'll be continuing these every 2 weeks from now on, as long as they're providing value to everyone. Next time, is a bit of a special focus on some of the advocacy work that's being done across the industry. Chris Hiravan, who's the MD at Spartan Race across Australia and New Zealand, is going to talk to us a bit about some of the work that's being done within the mass participation space to bring that industry, that community together. But also hear from some other people who are doing some work establishing networks in our industry and resources for us all to use and to tap into. So if you know of people or people that are doing great work in that space of connecting people across our industry or providing resources, please let me know, and I'll get them on the show. So thanks again. If I can help, please reach out, get in touch. All these event shows are available based on my website. There's also a podcast which is helping some people upskill at the moment, looking at event design, experience design, and there's a bunch of downloads and things there for people to access for free as well. Also running some programs at the moment, just helping people navigate their way through this phase. So please touch base if any of that's of use and value to you. So to finish up, thanks again. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Geordie. Thank you, Aiden. And
thank you.
Look forward to seeing you all in the next show. Thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.